Good evening and warm welcome everyone. Here I am Osmita Paudel, team lead of techWebinar Nepal and host for today's webinar. Welcome you all to the event. Today's is the 35th series of techWebinar Nepal and today's session is on building high performance application. To those who are new to the series, techWebinar Nepal conducts the webinar related to the new technology and IT related stuff with the renowned IT expert from around the world. Here, today, on the series Building High Performance Application, I would like to welcome the speaker, Alexandre Malavasi. I hope I pronounce your name correct. I would like to welcome you all to the webinar. Talking about the speaker of the session, he is the technical leader, consultant, .NET developer, MCP, MCTS, MCPD, ITIL, MBA graduate, MTAC. He is a staff software engineer with more than 13 years of experience using the .NET platform and other Microsoft technologies, developing complex systems for companies in South America, Europe, and the United States. In the meantime, he is an active speaker at IT conferences worldwide and helps various technical communities organizing events and creating content on YouTube and Medium, impacting thousands of developers. He is currently a Microsoft MVP under the Development Technologies category, and he is the author of the book Implementing Design Pattern with C# and .NET 5. Welcome to you to the session. Today's agenda for the session is discussing on the concept of single page application, SPA, native template available for SPA in .NET, performance aspect of .NET Core Web API, integration between Vue.js 3.0 and .NET 5, and coding demo. Before starting the session, little housekeeping. If you have any question, you can drop your question in the comment section. At the end of the session, I will pick up the question and I will put the question toward the speaker. Without further ado, I would like to welcome speaker Alexandre for your session. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
The floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be part of this webinar in Nepal. My name is Alexander, or Alexandre in Portuguese. It's a Brazilian name. I'm from Brazil. I'm speaking from Dublin, Ireland right now, and I'm glad to be here. So as was said, I'm gonna talk about the creation, development of high-performance applications using .NET 5 and Vue.js 3. I like the combination of these two technologies because each allow us to create really powerful applications with low-cost infrastructure on Azure, Amazon, or where we choose to deploy the application. So in case you wanna reach me out in my social media profiles, these are the links. Feel free to connect with me to talk about the related topics. I'm currently co-organizer of some technical communities in Ireland and Brazil, like Kaki Coders, Cloud Launching Learn, and I'm active member of the Microsoft MVP program. So before we jump into the demo using .NET 5 and Vue.js 3, it's important to talk about some important concepts of web architecture models and single page application as well. So if we talk about a traditional web architecture that happens which is the traditional model since the beginning of the web application. We will have browser requesting a page or web application, and a web application based in C#, Java, PHP, or other technology process the request and sends back to the client, to the browser, the entire page, including HTML, CSS, images, dynamic content, JavaScript, everything. So that's the traditional architecture for a web application. So what's the limitation of this traditional approach? Once the application starts having millions of requests, many clients requesting multiple pages, there are many ways to scale and provision a better infrastructure for the applications in terms of application server and database server as well. One of them is to scale vertically the application server, which is quite costly. It's expensive. So, and the same for the database. And we have another approach, which would be scale horizontally, creating multiple servers dynamically once the requests starts picking up. So, but in the other hand, if we talk about in a modern web application since 10 years ago, many developers and companies start using single page application concept, which means that once a user requests a web application in the browser and navigates to distinct pages, the server won't receive or send back the entire page anymore, only the underlying data that's being requested. So if you access and request first time a single page application based on Angular, React, or Vue.js, in the first request, the browser is going to download the entire application with all necessary files. And once you navigate to other pages in the application, the header, footer, menu, all the common parts for the web application won't be requested and sent from the server anymore. Only requests to the server based in web API with using JSON structure. So it's a much more effective approach in terms of web application architecture. And when we talk about this single page application concept, we still having a few options on the front-end side. We have Vue.js, Angular, React, and now with .NET platform, we have Blazor WebAssembly as well. So you can develop a single page application using C#, not only JavaScript. And if you talk about the application server, we have the standard languages as well, C#, Java, PHP, Python, and many others. So that's the idea, to mix process in the server, but delegate as much as we can responsibilities to the browser in order to save server costs, and not only server costs, but provide a better experience for the users. So talking about .NET 5, it's important to understand the history of .NET. It's been in the market since 1996. It's a long time. I've been using since ASP.NET 2.0. It's a long time. Many things happened in the meantime, but the most important thing in the evolution of the framework is the fact that since the creation in 1996 and 2016, all the Microsoft platform technologies, tools were based in Microsoft Windows operating system. And since ASP.NET Core, the very first version, the .NET platform became multi-platform, so you can run in macOS, Linux, Windows, so the same application, and it extends to other products and technologies in the Microsoft platform, not only for C# development or ASP.NET. And with .NET 5, we have the entire consolidation of what started in 2016, consolidating multi-platform development for desktop, web, cloud, mobile, gaming, IoT, AI, and other technologies in the .NET platform. So we can consider the end of a huge stage in migration to .NET platform since November past year. And in November this year, Microsoft will release .NET 6, which brings a lot of nice and useful updates to multi-platform development. So in terms of ASP.NET technology, we have few options if we want to create web applications in general. So the first one that were created in the very beginning of the .NET platform was ASP.NET Web Forms, which is obsolete right now. Many companies still having legacy projects based on web forms, but that's the past. We have ASP.NET MVC, which is a consolidated architecture for development of web applications, not only for Microsoft technologies, but we have the same model for Java, Python. We can simulate the same process, and for other program languages as well. ASP.NET Razor Pages, ASP.NET Web API, which provides only API endpoints to another front-end application based in Angular, React, Vue.js, or even another .NET application. So we are going to use for the demo today GIS project here, as we will have an ASP.NET Web API based on .NET 5 in the backend and a Vue.js 3 application on front-end. And the most modern template for web applications in .NET is Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly, which allow us to create single-page applications in .NET using C# instead of JavaScript, which is pretty cool because when we talk about WebAssembly, it's a new technology that it's approved by all the big tech companies, and is gonna be the next big thing in terms of performance and capabilities to run on the browser. So we can run C# and other server-side program languages in the browser right now. And of course, I have to mention that only the most modern versions of the browser supports WebAssembly. So old versions of Internet Explorer, Chrome, etc. don't support that, but all the modern versions does. So speaking of Vue.js, it's one of the JavaScript frameworks, one of the many ones available on the market. In order to build Vue.js applications, you have to install Node.js in your machine because it's based on NPM packages. So despite the backend itself is not a Node.js application, you have to have Node.js installed in your machine to manage packages for the Vue.js application. And as what happened with Angular, React, and other web component-based components or frameworks, Vue.js is based in three different blocks. each component, a template which contains the HTML, CSS, and everything that concerns to the presentation of the component. So if we compare with Angular and React, there is a slightly difference in terms of syntax for the JavaScript part, but the concept is the same. You can even use in TypeScript instead of JavaScript in the Vue.js components, as we do with Angular. And in this example here, I'm placing the template script and style in the same file, but you can split in different files in order to have a better separation for your component. So let's go to the demo, as we have just a few time to present a lot of stuff. So we are gonna build a Vue.js application that's gonna simulate or emulate the same template we have for Angular and React on Visual Studio. So each will contain the counter components to demonstrate how it works, and as well the standard weather forecast. So we're gonna build a component that's gonna connect to the web API. It's gonna return the data and display dynamically on a fetch data component. So let's jump to the Visual Studio. Can someone please confirm if my Visual Studio is being displayed on the screen sharing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna create an application from scratch. So I have, I'm using Visual Studio 2019. I could use the previous version of Visual Studio 2022 as well, based on .NET 6, but considering .NET 6 is still in preview, I'm gonna use .NET 5 for this presentation. So I will create an ASP.NET Core Web API project. Let's give a name. It could be Web Application 2. And I'm going to choose .NET 5, which is the current stable version of the platform. I will disable HTTPS and Open API support because we don't need them for this demo. So this ASP.NET Core Web API template contains the standard. If you take a look in the controller, each contains the standard controller for the weather forecast API, as we have for other projects, project templates on Visual Studio for Blazor, React, Angular, etc. And as it's a web API, we have edge controllers service here. If we would have the ASP.NET MVC approach, we could have controllers and views here, but considering we won't use Razor pages in this project, we are going to use Vue.js. We don't need this kind of configuration. So as we are going to mix .NET platform and Vue.js, for this demo, I'm going to place the Vue.js application in the same solution. So that's a nice approach for small applications, but when we are talking about large applications with many developers working in the same repository on GitHub or Azure DevOps or any control version system you are using, sometimes it's better to split in different solutions to have a better approach in terms of branching strategy and this kind of thing. So I'm gonna create the Vue.js application here using command line. And as I said early in the presentation, you have to have the Node.js installed in your machine. I have this version installed on my machine. There are more recent versions available to download, but that's unstable enough, in my opinion. So, and we have to install as well the Vue CLI using npm package. So I have just two, the Node and the Vue CLI installed on my machine, because that helps us to create Vue.js applications with command line faster. So first of all, you have to create the Vue.js application. I'm gonna create in the root folder of my solution here, and I'm gonna call the folder or the application as a client app. You can give whatever name you want. So I'm gonna run this command here. There is a type mistake. Let me client app. Okay, that's fine now. So once you have GIS installed, let me clean my cache here. 1 minute. Okay. Now it's okay. So I'm going to use Vue create client app command. We don't need npm install. And once we use that command using Vue CLI, that's going to ask us the version of the Vue.js we are going to use. We have Vue version 2, which is the default, but I'm going to use Vue 3, even that's in preview. It's stable enough and contains all the features available on Vue 2. I'm going to choose that one. And when we do that, that's going to download all the packages, the npm packages required to run Vue.js application 3. And that's going to prepare the startup of our application with the basic template for Vue.js, depending on your internet connection speed. That may take a lot of time. That take about 2-3 minutes in my machine. And once, considering you are working with Vue.js application and you are using Node, you use npm commands for literally everything. So to install the packages to connect with a web API, or even to use routes in Vue.js. While that's running here, let's prepare the ASP.NET application to use Vue.js. The first thing you have to do in your web application is installing the package Vue CLI middleware. I will install the latest version for .NET 5. I will accept. And in our startup, considering that's a web API and we are gonna mix Vue.js application with web API, we have to tell the the web application, the ASP.NET Web API, that's we are gonna use a single page application. So we have to make some configuration here in order to work. Let's see the progress of the packages. All good. So the installation of the Vue.js package are completed, and we have the client app folder here with the default files for Vue.js application. So in your startup, file, you have first of all to tell that you are going to use static files in your project. And once you are using pointing and configure the service for a single page application SPA in a .NET application, you have to specify the folder path for the single page application. In our case, the folder client app, but it should be your project name for the Vue.js application you chose when you run the Vue create command line structure. And in this configure service here, we have as well to set and configure that we are going to use static files for single page application. If we compare this approach with Angular and React, the configuration process is exactly the same until this point. And we have to configure in the final the application to use SPA. And as you can see here, if that's running in development mode, I'm specifying here to run the npm script. So it would be the same if we run manually the Vue.js application and run manually the web API. But in that case, I wanna the application to behave, the web API to behave as it was like the same application. So the web application, the web API, the backend is going to start and build the Vue.js application as well automatically. So it is complaining here because we have to refer the package we installed, the Vue CLI middleware, and we have to specify as well the folder name for our Vue.js application, similar we did here. So this is the only configuration we have to do on the ASP.NET Core Web API. If you run the application, that will firstly open and run the default route for the web API with the weather forecast endpoint. But if we remove this path and run the root path, that should open the Vue.js application, because we configured the startup of the application to run the Vue.js application as well. So we are running two applications here at the same time, the ASP.NET Core Web API and the Vue.js application. They are running in different ports. So, but it is working as it was like a single application, the backend and the front end running at the same time. As we certified that the application is already working, we have to proceed with the demo and creating the counter components and the fetch data component, which is gonna connect to the web API and ping this weather forecast controller here. So in order to work with routes and create components and pages in Vue.js, we have to install extra packages to configure routes. So I'm gonna install here the view router package that will allow to specify routes for your single page application regarding our components. So I'm gonna specify here the command npm install view router at next. I'm using at next here in the comments because considering Vue.js 3 is in preview, I specify the preview version of Vue router as well to be compatible. That's faster to install than the Vue create command. That's gonna take like 20 seconds or less. That's okay. So I'm gonna install as well the package to call APIs in Vue.js. There are some options created by communities in general, but I'm gonna use the Axios one. Not only because it's the must-used one, but in terms of compatibility with Vue.js 3, I think that works really fine. And for the front, for the style of the application, I'm going to use Bootstrap to save time in the styling process. So just to recap, we installed the Vue router package, the Axios package, and Bootstrap. So from that point, we don't need to install any more packages to work with APIs and to configure what we need. So once we create the client app, the Vue.js CLI commands will create a gist template here with specific folders, assets, which is gonna contain like the static files for your application, images, CSS files, or whatever you need to work as static file. And we have the components folder where we are gonna place all your components. So I'm gonna create here the counter component here as a copy of the previous one. Let's delete all the content here. And I'm gonna copy the counter component and create the fetch data component, which is empty as well. And I'm gonna rename this home word component to home. If you open the home component here, you are gonna see the template section, which contains the HTML, the script section, as I showed before on the PowerPoint, and the style section. There is this comment here regarding the scoped attributes. So that means if we specify the scoped attribute in the style section, this style will be used only for this component, and it will never affect other parts of the application if we are rendering the same page multiple components. So it's a good practice to use scoped to avoid unexpected behavior in terms of styling for the Vue.js application. And in the script session here, as we rename it from hello world to home, I'm gonna change here to home as well. And I'm gonna create an extra component here, which is called nav menu to place the header of your application with specific options for the counter and fetch data components like a link. So we have we've created our components here, and considering we created these AMP components here, Vue.js works with the concept of roles. That means we can configure the path for our components that will be typed by the user in the URL. In our case, we have 2 pages, fetch data and counter, and 3 if we mention the home component as well. But whatever component in our application that you want to behave as a page, a traditional page, you have to specify a route for you. We have installed the Vue router package, and now we have to configure the routes of our application. Inside this folder here, I'm gonna create a folder called router, and inside this router folder, I'm gonna create an index.js file, and I don't need this quantity here. So in this file here, we will configure our routes. I have this ready already. I'm gonna copy and paste to save time. So what we have here, in the top, I specified the Vue router package, referencing this create web history and create router features here. And after that, I imported to this file a reference to our 3 components that we wanna that behave as pages. So components fetch data, components counter, and components home, given a specific name. And I created here an array with our routes specifying the path. So, and the underlying components that will be associated with these routes. So if the user types in the URL, the main domain is /counter, the application will render the counter components, and the same for fetch data. So, and you can have as well the specification of sub-components in this route in order to specify distinct layout pages with different child components. And here I created an object called the router, specifying the create router function presented on this Vue router. And I am exporting here this router that's going to be used in the configuration of the application. And the last configuration we are going to do in the JavaScript part is the adaptation of this main.js file. So in this, I'm importing the Bootstrap library here to use across the application globally. This is the specification of our Vue.js application. The specification of the main component, which is app Vue, that's the default main component if you use Vue CLI. And I'm importing here the router that we just created under the router folder inside this index.js file. So that's all the imports we need to specify. And here I'm specified the commands to create the Vue.js application, and I explicitly told to the web application to use a router, passing the router object here. So that's the necessary configuration we have to specify here. And if we go to the main component app view, there are the same sections we have for child components, template, script, and style. So I won't use this image and this hello world component. Instead of that, I'm gonna use the nav menu component and the router view. And here I'm gonna import the nav menu component itself over here, as we did with the router. I have to specify the component here, and I'm gonna change that to nav menu. So over here, I specified this router view components to tell to the Vue.js application that I'm going to use router instead of explicit components on GS view. And this nav menu, it's the main options in the header. I will create in the next. So this nav menu, I have the HTML ready as well for this components. And what we have here, a nav menu with 2 menu options. So that's a list, and I specified the path for our counter component and for our fetch component using this router link specification here with exactly that syntax. So if we use router link, once the user clicks that and change the URL using that option, the application won't request the entire page to the server. It will only change the path of the URL and redirect in the client to the underlying component. So the first component we will create is
hello, mate. Sorry to interrupt. So we have more 20 minutes. So if any attendee has the question, so you can type on the QA panel, and please consider the time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the counter components, I have that very ready to save time as well. So I basically created in the template a specific button calling a specific method to call increment counter. And here I'm displaying the current stage for a variable counter I created in the script section. So in this script section, I specified the name of the components, the current count variable, and the JavaScript function that will be triggered for the click option for this button. So if we run the application here, if the syntax is correct, and if you change to the root, it should run the home component. It is building the Vue.js application. While it's running here, just to recap, the path we specified in the router file here. If I type the root of the application, it should bring to the page the home component. So it is working already, our home component. If we click here in the counter, that's changed the router, the route for /counter. And if we change to home, ROM, and counter, that as you can see in the browser here, it doesn't refresh the page. It's changing to different routes without refreshing. So it's pretty cool, and it's the main advantage of single page applications. So it saves a lot of server resources. And if we click here, our component is already working. So that's a simple structure for component here. If we go back to the counter, like it's really simple, and Vue.js is reactive. That means if we change or any function change the state of the variable associated to the template, the component is gonna update the component view in the browser without refreshing the page and manipulating the DOM with high efficiency. We have the counter components already done. Let's change now the fetch data component, which is more complex. I have that ready as well to save time. And what we have here. So in the template section, I created here a table, and I'm using this if directive. If we compare with Angular, it would be ng if, and React would be similar. So any directive in Angular has the prefix v, this prefix v, and it will mean like v4, v, and any directive for HTML attributes. And I created here a forecast array, and for each item in this array, I'm binding here the rows for our table, specifying here the properties of the objects returned by the API itself. If we take a look in the backend for this weather forecast object, it contains like date, temperature in centigrados, in Fahrenheit, and summary. So going back to the fetch data component, so it matches as the API is returning JSON. And here in the script section, I imported the Axios package that we installed previously. Fetch data is the name of the component in case we have to refer in other parts of the application as a child component. And I created here a get forecast method, which pings the ASP.NET Web API and populates with the response the forecast array here. And there is a specific life cycle for any Vue.js component. So if we compare with an ASP.NET MVC application, the request happens, and the view receives the information from the controller. And if we talk about like a Razor page, there are specific events regarding the life cycle of the page itself. It is exactly the same concept for Vue.js components. So when the component renders, this event is triggered. We have other events here, like destroy when the user routes to other components created which runs before this mounted one. So we have a lot of computed when specific elements on the template already run. So we have many events regarding Vue.js components life cycle, but I'm using mounted here because that's enough for our case. So we have everything ready here for our components. If you run the application again and change to, I'm gonna refresh this and change to the root of our application. It is building the Vue.js application. And here on the back end, I'm gonna specify a breakpoint to demonstrate the life cycle itself. It is taking time here while it loads. Let's go back and recap a little the configuration for the global configuration for the Vue.js application. So we have here the reference to Bootstrap, the reference to Vue, the reference to the main components in your application, and the router configuration. So when we talk about a production application using Vue.js, we will have security compliance, JWT authentication, and much like more things. Okay, let me rebuild the application here. Okay. You open a new tab. Let me review to see if there is any type of mistake here. It's all right. Let me clean my cache. Okay, cleaning my cache.
Hi, Mick. So in the meantime, so we can say some of the question to you. So basically, so why Vue.js is better than the Angular? So what is the use of Vue.js rather than other staff framework?
Okay, Vue.js was created by like former participants of the Angular community, which means if we compare actually, if we compare with Angular, I would say Vue.js is simpler to learn, as it doesn't require necessarily to use TypeScript and other more structured components. So if you want to create in a single file, you can. The components, if you want to use TypeScript, it is optional. But I would say, considering Vue.js application is simpler than Angular to learn, and in terms of the bundle files, there are some discussions in terms of performance, but I did compare the performance in production environments, and I found Vue.js with a better performance, as it uses better the concept of virtual DOM. So when the component state changes, it doesn't render again the DOM. So, and because of that, has a really high performance. That's the main, I would say, the main difference. But comparing performance itself, I think Vue.js is better if you have a large application. So if you build a large application with tons of components in Angular, the build is going to take time. The first download of the single page application will take time as well. And the separation of the application in modules will be harder to maintain. That's the main difference, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much, mate. So I have unmuted the attendee, so you can unmute. I have given you the permission, so you can ask the question to our speaker. So if there is any question you need to ask. So yeah, over to you, mate.
So it's still running here for some reason. I think I have too many things running my machine at the same time. But the API call using Axios works really similar to what we do in jQuery or other JavaScript framework. It's really simple, I would say. I have a production application running on using Vue.js 3 and .NET 5, which has almost 1 million requests per day. And for this application, I use to deploy in a really simple Linux web server using on Azure, and a simple configuration and server for SQL Server. So I'm using Entity Framework Core 5 and the most recent versions of all the .NET packages. So each costs about $50 per month to keep the application running with high performance. That's the advantage to use single page applications instead of the traditional ASP.NET MVC and ASP.NET Razor. Considering on each request, the server doesn't process everything, this entire page, and return it to the user. Only the necessary data goes from the server to the browser and from the browser to the server. Because of that, the performance is so attractive in terms of performance, in terms of results.
Okay, thank you for that one. So we are in the end of our webinar. So at least for 5 minutes, we can, if there is any QA question, then attendee can ask. So you can unmute, or otherwise we can wrap up. Yeah, so I think our master of ceremony, Asmita, so please continue.
Okay, so let me share my slides again. So this is the result for the fetch data component that I wasn't able to run right now, as other process is conflicting in my machine with the port on Visual Studio. Right now, I think probably is the Zoom application. So basically, it's really simple to combine Vue.js applications with .NET platform. The only thing you have to do is create the Vue.js application inside the Web API project and configure the startup, installing the underlying packages for Vue CLI and middleware. So if anyone, even after the presentation, in case someone watches on YouTube and or other platform, feel free to reach me out. These are my social media profiles. So, and thank you very much. And obrigado, which thank you in Brazilian Portuguese. Thank you for the opportunity and for everyone who participated.
So I have a question. Like, can we get the
for the wonderful session on this .NET and Vue.js, and I hope that personally I have benefited attending this session, and it was really informative session, I will say, and I think that audience also get a lot of information from you, and if you want to further connect to him, then you can get connected with his LinkedIn profile. There is all the social media platform from where you can get all the information about him and get connected to him.
I think one speaker, one attendee is asking the question.
Okay. Is there any question? I didn't get it, but
I just want to say that can we get these codes so that they can practice or do something?
Yes, actually, I have. I forgot to mention on the presentation. I have Visual Studio extension that already creates this web API with Vue.js projects. Let me pick the link here. So each contains exactly the same examples I did. So, but you don't have to configure anything. You don't have to create the Vue.js application or configure the startup of the web application itself. Let me access the chat here. Okay. I'm missing the chat option here. Let me see. Okay. So in this link, you have the download link for the Visual Studio 2019 extension. So once you download and install, as we have templates for creating like Blazor application, Angular application on Visual Studio as a native project, this is going to provide an option to create the exactly same application using Visual Studio as well. So it's a new template that I built for the community, and each contains the counter and fetch data examples I demonstrate on the presentation.
Okay, I hope Saurabhji have got the information. By saying this, we are at the end of the session. I would like to once again thank Alexandre for this wonderful session, very informative. And by saying this, thank you to all the attendees for today's session joining. One more question is there, I think. Can we have access to this video after this session? Okay. Yes, of course, you will have the access to the video. Okay. By saying this, I would like to thank all the attendees who have attended today's session. Please follow the techWebinar Nepal for further updates, and you will get this video also in that page. So stay tuned for our next webinar series, and thank you once again, Alexandre, for this informative session. Thank you all the attendees. Good evening, everyone, and good night. Along with good night, wherever you are, stay safe. Goodbye. Thank you.